it's possible that I said that we'd move on to more core stuff, but I figured since we're already messing around with animations, we should go ahead and just keep dealing with the animation system to get it all packed in the same spot. And then we'll come back to animation stuff for other parts later. But for right now, I'm going to add some thruster animation to my ship so that whenever I'm moving forward, thrusters will appear down here. Whenever I'm moving left, the thruster will appear on the right, and vice versa. So on your Google Classroom, which hopefully is up. Yep, Google Classroom. On your resources, I have a 2D thruster fire sprites. There are 4 separate pictures. Download each of those image files and import them into your document or into your project, whatever it's called. Import them into your project. So I have mine up on my screen. It's these guys right here. So I'm just going to select all of them and I'm going to put them in my sprites effects folder right there. So it's imported. I'm going to go ahead and pick the first sprite, which for me is going to be this little baby one right here. And obviously my thruster is pointed the wrong direction for going forward, right? So I need to rotate this. So on my rotation, I'm going to change the rotation to 180. And then I'm going to position this underneath my ship. Now I could have one thruster, but I want it to have like a dynamic thing where whenever I'm turning one direction, it points out the other side. So I'm going to set them so that they are attached to these bits right here. It'll look really cool, I think. So I'm going to rename this thruster R for thruster right. I'm going to drag it up to my yellow player and make it a child of my yellow player for reasons which will become obvious later. But let's go ahead and animate this guy. So I'm going to keep him selected and I'm going to create an animation clip and I'm going to call this thruster anim and I'm going to put it in my folder for animations right here. Save it. Okay, now I need to drag all of my sprites in, so I'm just going to select them all. So how I did that, if I haven't said before, I click on the top one, hold shift, click on the bottom one, it selects everything between the two. And now if I hit play, it's just whoom, really fast. Okay, let's slow this down to 10, see how that looks. 10's maybe even a little fast, but I'm kind of okay with it. That's cute. Okay, so I've got it set to 10, and I think I'm going to change the position of it just a little bit. I don't like the way it's overlapping my player. Let's look at this now. Yeah, there we go. That's a good spot. So now I'm going to duplicate this thruster up here and rename this one thruster L because it's going to go to the left. And I'm going to drag him over here. Whenever I hit play, they play. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So now I need to do this fancy thing where I'm going to set up animation so that whenever my player moves, I activate these thrusters, and whenever it's not moving, the thrusters are turned off, and so on and so forth. So right now I'm going to click on thruster R and thruster L. I'm going to turn them inactive. I'm going to go to my yellow player, and I'm going to create an animation for him. I'm going to just call this player underscore idle. I'm going to call it Y player because it's my yellow ship, and at some point it's possible I may want to make this maybe have other ships or other colored players. I don't know, but I want it to be flexible, so I haven't decided yet. That's going to go into my animations folder, but the important part is this underscore idle. It tells me that this is the idle animation whenever I'm working on this. So animation, save. There's nothing in here, and I want it to just be the ship not moving. So I'm just going to grab the player animation texture and just put that in there. It's not very complex. That's fine. I'm going to slow the samples down to 10 just for the sake of keeping it consistent because everything else has been at 10. But That's fine. I don't need it to be anything else. Now that I've got this set up, and you'll notice this animation process has been just a little bit different than before, we're going to create a flying forward animation, a turning right animation, and a turning left animation. So let's go ahead and make a flying forward. So up above on our animation console, under preview, there's a Y player idle and then a kind of drop down symbol. So whenever I click this, I can create a new clip. And when I call this clip Y player underscore thrusting for it's moving forward. Save that. And then I want to add my ship property to it. And then I'm going to add another property. Now, what's really neat is I've got the children of my yellow player, my thruster R and my thruster L, are down here. So I'm going to add these things to it. So if you click Add Property, and then whichever thing you're turning on, and then click Is Active and hit the plus sign, right now they're set to not active. So it's already taken on, like it knows that normally this is set to inactive. So I'm going to set them to active so that whenever we are thrusting, they will turn on. And I won't be able to preview this animation just yet. It just shows that they're active. It doesn't access their animation yet. But I'm going to set the samples to 10 because I want it to be regular speed, not freaky fast speed. So I'm good with that. And let's go ahead and make our new clips for the others. So I want Y player. Should I call it R? Turn R. We'll call it that. Y player underscore turn R. Save that. I've got to add my ship sprite back in here. And then I'm going to turn on my left thruster because whenever you thrust from this side, you turn this way, if that makes sense. Kind of like in a car. You put power on one side and your car goes the other way. It's the same thing with this. It's the same concept. So I want to turn on my left sprite whenever I want to turn to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my is active for that and set that to active. Change my sample speed to 10. And then create a new clip. Y player underscore turn L. And same thing. Drag that in, add a property, turn on my right thruster this time, set it to active, set my samples to 10. Okay, so I've got all this stuff set up. Now, nothing is hooked up to any of this, basically. Whenever I created an animation for my player, it automatically created this Animator Controller, which is great because I'm going to need to hook this into my script, and I'm going to have to do some things for calling that. So let's just save everything we've worked on so far. We need to open up our Animator Controller, which is this thing that you might have noticed earlier. It was created. It's called the name of whatever you saved your animation as. So in this case, the Animator Controller for my yellow player is just called yellow player. And then underneath, I've got the animations for idle, thrusting, turn left, and turn right. So if I double click on this, it opens up the Animator Controller panel. I'm going to close my Asset tab. And if I zoom, this is going to look a little hokey. I'm going to make this. What do I want to do with you? I'm just going to pull it out so it sits on top of everything. You can do whatever you need to do. I just have a small screen. So I've got this that has all of these animations that I have put on my scene right here. So I've got Y player idle, which is automatically hooked up. So whenever my game turns on, it will start playing Y player idle. And these other animators that don't know when they need to be turned on, what we need to do is give them parameters that tell them when this thing happens, then go ahead and turn on. So if you, on this tab on the left, there's layers and there's parameters. So we need to click on parameters. And it says list is empty. So we need to hit the plus sign. We're going to add a float value. And we're going to call this float thrust. Thrust works fine. We're going to set it to 0. We're going to need another one another float called turn and leave that at 0 as well. So let's go ahead and we're just going to hook up our player thrusting for now. And you can click and drag these around however you want. I think it will look a little more smooth if I spread them out this way. Okay, so I need to make a transition from my player idle to my player thrusting. So if I right click on player idle and click make transition and then click to connect this line here to player thrusting, I need to click this little white line and it comes up with this in the inspector. I'm going to turn off the has exit time. I'm going to turn off the transition duration because I don't need that. And the condition tells it when to trigger the thrusting animation. So I'm going to hit plus and I'm going to say it'll go to thrusting when thrust is greater than, and then I'm going to use 0.01. It's a very small number, but makes it so that it is not set to 0 because 0 has other things, and we'll talk about that probably more later whenever we get to turning, but whenever it's greater than 1. And that's good there. On thrusting, we need to make a transition back to player idle. Click on that. Turn off the exit time. Set the transition duration to 0. And then our thrust needs to be less than 0.01. So whenever our thrust equals these things. Now, there's still no way that it knows what it's doing. We have to actually hook this up in the code. So I'm going to, I guess I'll throw this back in here. Put that right there for now. And we're going to need to open up our script for our player to tell it when to actually load this. So first of all, we need to get access to our animator component. So in our effects field, because this is an effect in essence, we need a serialized field so we can drag it in and call it animator. And we're just going to use animator lowercase because there's no need for us to name it anything any more descriptive than that. It is literally just the thing that animates. I'm going to minimize that so you can see everything a little better. And we're going to activate our animator whenever we are moving, correct? So whenever we thrust, this is where player movement happens. So this seems like a good place to insert this. So in between how it moves, I'm just going to go ahead and hit in animator dot set float. So we're setting that float value. And then we're going to name it whatever you named it. In mine, I called it thrust, which you can double check. I'll go back to it in just a second. But and then I need to set my float that is named thrust to my thrust input. Which, if you remember correctly, whenever we go forward, it sets itself to 1. Whenever we're hitting W or up, it sets itself to 1. So that's setting our float greater than the 0.01 that we set it to, right? So now with this in here, it should, whenever we hook it up, go ahead and animate. So if I click on Unity and I let it finish thinking about its life, and I come over here to my player, it is looking for an animator. I'm going to grab my animator component and drag it right in. And let's see if this works. So if I hit play, I'm going to tap W. Whenever I tap W, it turns on. And you can see to the left here, it's running player idle. And whenever I thrust forward, it's running player Y thrusting. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. And as soon as I let go, it stops playing it, which is perfect. That is exactly what I want. Now for doing the other animations, we need to do a little bit more leg work. So I'm going to drag this back out so it's easier to see. Because we have to set our values a little bit differently because our thrusters, whenever they are turning to the right, it's going to be a positive number, and when we turn to the left, it's going to be a negative number. So we have to do 2 scripts for that. So make a transition from your idle to turn right. And whenever we click on that, we need to set our transition duration to 0 and no exit time. Add some conditions. And this time, instead of our thrust, we're using our turn. And for turn right, it's a positive number. So 0.01 is fine. We can use exactly the same as we did before. Turn left will be a negative, but we're not there yet. So transition duration 0, and then I'm just going to go through this quickly because at this point I think you probably can figure it out pretty well. So now I want to activate my turn right when and go back to player idle whenever I turn right. So got that figured out in here. Now in the code, how we do this is animator dot set float is going to equal turn, comma, and then our turn input, which remember is either 1, 0, or -1. And that should turn on and turn positive. So let's double check that that is working. Grab this guy. Yeah, put him there for now. Okay. Let it think about its life. Hit play. Turn right. I'm tapping the D key. Now whenever I turn left, nothing happens, which is fine. But whenever I hit D, I start working my way to the right, which is a great visual cue for whenever I'm slowing down and regaining the momentum, but it's still moving. Perfect. Okay. It's a visual cue to the player that they are doing a thing, which is what we want. So now, grab this animator, drag it back out. Wish I had a bigger screen. Haha. There we go. Okay. One more. So player idle, make transition to turn left. No exit time. Open up settings, change the duration to 0. Add conditions, turn. In this case, we need less than, and we're going to do -0.01 because we need the number to be negative. It will turn to -1 whenever we go to the left. So we need it to be less than 0.01, and then make a transition back to player idle. And by now, this should be becoming kind of second nature to you. Turn greater than -0.01. So I think this should work. I'm going to throw this animator over here for now. I'm going to tap the A key, D key, A key, D key, forward, left, right, forward. Now, I could, if I wanted to, try to make it so that it would go stronger on one than the other, but I don't really need that. Another thing, while we're messing with the animation, you notice whenever I run into things, the player ship is still there, just like waiting to die, which is a little silly. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the sprite renderer. To do that, just go into where we handle the player's death, which is in here in this coroutine. And whenever it creates the audio clip and creates the explosion effect, we're just going to add get component. And that component we're looking for in this case is the sprite renderer, because I don't want to destroy it. If I destroy it, then it won't be able to run the rest of the code, which I discovered while I was messing with this code in the past. So we just want to make it invisible. So we're going to find the sprite renderer, parentheses dot enabled, meaning is the checkbox turned on, and then we're going to set it to false. So when it runs this coroutine, it's going to make a sound, make an explosion, and turn off the sprite renderer. Then it's going to wait 2 seconds, destroy the game object, and load the game over scene. So I've saved that. Let's double check in Unity that that is working the way it should. Boop, 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 boop. And perfect. And it explodes and it's gone. That's all I wanted. So yeah, that is our ship is pretty well animated right now. I know that that wasn't necessary stuff that we had to add in at this point in our game, but it is new stuff, and I think it's relevant and useful to have in there as we're working on the rest of the game and we add more stuff in. So I think next we'll handle maybe getting the bullets turned on and then making the bullets be able to destroy things. And yeah, that sounds like a good place to go from here.